Okay, so if you ever saw a 12-year-old who started talking and he began to converse like a 40-year-old, that would be a little strange, don't you think? I mean, it might even feel a little creepy. But maybe that's a little insight into what it must have felt like to play Magnus Carlsen when he was only 12 years old. Because this game we're going to go over today is a shockingly sophisticated game. Not only could Magnus calculate, but he had an unreal, mature approach to the game, even at a very young age. This game was played in 2003. His opponent is a player named Christian Lacqua, who is rated 2196. When this game was played, Magnus, again, only 12, but was rated 2385, so quite good already. Let's jump right in. Magnus begins with d4. His opponent plays knight f6, and they play a pretty basic opening. He did this then, and he does this now. G3, the idea, of course, is to find Keto, get on that long square diagonal. D5 creates a wall, making it harder for the bishop to become active. Castles, castles, and now C4. And we're in a mainline Catalan. White wants to take that pawn away to open up the line of attack for the bishop, and that's actually the main move. Black usually does take him. This is called the open Catalan, but here his opponent played C6, or the closed Catalan, and that's trying to create a real strong point on D5, just like a rock, and really neutralize that bishop on G2 and say, you're dead to me, B3 helps defend the C4 pawn. B6 to develop that light squared bishop. It can go to B7. It can go to A6. Queen C2, bishop B7. And these moves are fairly standard and can be played in different orders. Bishop to B2, Queen C7, and the rooks are centralized. And White does score very well from this position. And here Magnus plays a very thematic move in the Catalan, the move E4. If White can play this, they usually will play it. And Black cannot allow this e-pawn to go to e5. It'll just completely constrict his position. He'll be crushed. So they almost always take on e4. That is the best decision to e4. And queen e4, rook f to d8. Black plays one more move before the thematic pawn break of c5 is played. Black has to play that. In a perfect world, Black might be able to play a move like e5. That might be even better. But White has a total clamp on that e5 square. No way that's happening. And after c5, this bishop at b7 all of a sudden is going to challenge that bishop at g2. So Black definitely wants to play that move. Rook f to e1, the final centralization, right? All the pieces are right in the middle and developed. But now c5 hits the queen, challenges the center. So Magnus deals with this in the most aggressive way possible. He does not move his queen. He plays the move d5. Now, there is a pin on this pawn for the time being, but he has more space, and this bishop now roams the entire length of that dark square diagonal. That can make Black very, very nervous. In fact, Black's next move is bishop to f6. He sees that bishop as the biggest threat at the moment. Now, this next move for Magnus, it's not a novelty. It had been played a couple of times in a couple of obscure games many years before this was played, but it is a very mature move. And I don't know if he came up with it over the board or if he was familiar with those games. They weren't notable games, lower-rated players. And the move is this, bishop to c1. He keeps the bishop on the board, and now this bishop can go to f4, gaining a tempo by attacking the queen, and it also supports a knight jump to g5, where in coordination with the queen, he can attack the h7 pawn. A very sophisticated and good move. The queen goes to b8, anticipating that attack, also maybe can shift to a8 and sort of pile up on that light square diagonal. The knight goes to g5. Now, this is the game's novelty. Obviously, he's threatening to just play queen takes h7 check, and Black goes ahead and just chops that knight off the board. Well, what if he plays, say, knight f8, right? That defends the h7 pawn. Well, that would be a terrible mistake because of this shot from White. Boom, knight takes f7, an incredibly powerful move. And if the king recaptures the knight, pawn takes check. And when the king moves, queen takes b7. As you see, the queen is defended by the g2 bishop, and the game would be over. So Black takes the knight with the bishop, but now Magnus has the advantage of the two bishops. So he's already getting advantages. He's got some space here. His position is building. Rook to e8. Now bishop to f4, aiming at the queen. Black could play e5, but after, say, bishop to c1, he's got a protected passed pawn in the middle of the board. White would just be better in that case. So the queen moves to a8, increasing the pressure down the diagonal and the pin on the d-pawn. And here Magnus plays a very powerful move. In fact, it's really an amazing move. D takes e6. It's like, what? Isn't he just giving up his queen? You can't just give up your queen in the middle of the board. Well, it's not so simple. A very strong shot in this position. Bishop takes queen was played, but now bishop takes e4, and look at black's queen. It's almost as if the black queen is checkmated. These two bishops control all of the squares the queen could go to. The only way to block that attack would be rook to c6, but that loses immediately to e d7. The game would be over if the rook tried to block the queening square, and then just bishop takes, and then bishop to c7, hitting the rook, and if queen takes, rook e8 is checkmate after rook takes and promote to a queen. That would be it. So that's how far ahead he saw with that sacrifice. So the queen, after rook e6, black has to give the queen back. Bishop takes queen, rook takes e1, rook takes e1, rook takes a8. Now, the material is equal. So was that just a fancy combination that didn't achieve anything? No, it achieved a lot. And this is, again, his amazing sophistication. Now, rook to e7. Look at the position. Magnus has a rook on the 7th rank compared to the far more passive rook at a8, and he has a better minor piece. He has a bishop versus a knight with pawns on both sides of the board. So Magnus has a very strong endgame from that sacrificial combination that he just played. Knight to f8 was played. He can't defend the knight because bishop c7 kicks the rook and wins it. So knight to f8, the idea is black wants to play knight to g6, which would fork the rook and the bishop, and he would get rid of one of those advantages, the inferior minor piece. So to prevent that, Magnus plays the rook to b8, so there's no fork at g6. The knight goes to e6, which does hit the bishop, and now bishop to b8, attacking the a7 pawn with the rook and the bishop. If the pawn moves, then b6 would fall. So black plays knight to d8, rook to e7, threatening mate, right? If rook takes bishop, then you just would mate. The knight goes back to e6, and now bishop takes a7. And Magnus has used those advantages to win some material. He now has an a pawn, king to f8, rook b7, knight d8, and here rook to b8 was played. If rook takes rook, then that's an easy win for white. You just take, and bishop c7, and these ripe, dark squared pawns on the queen side are just going to fall. So he goes into the rook endgame. Rook endgames are more drawish than a bishop versus knight endgame as a rule. So king to e7, rook to d2 to defend that a-pawn. King to e6, defending the queen. Andrew Soltis, who analyzed this in a book, recommended the move g5 here. The point being that in a position with an extra pawn on the queen side, attacking the pawns on the king side often determines who wins, and use that pawn on the queen side as a distraction. But here black plays king to e6, king g2, h5, h4, g6, king to f3. What white wants to do is play a4, king f3, and rook to d5, and he'll control the entire board. King to f3, king e5, a4, rook to c7, now rook to d5 check. We see those moves in sequence, king e6, king f4. And now Magnus's pawns and pieces are all on the ideal squares. He would love to penetrate on the king side by moving the king to g5. And if black plays f6 to keep that from happening, Magnus can just play rook to d8 and attack the pawns from behind, g8 and b8, and he would be in very good shape. So the rook goes back to c8 to prevent that incursion. King to g5, rook to a8, f4. He wants to play rook to e5 check, forcing the king over, and then play king to f6, going after the f7 pawn. So black plays f6 check first. Now, it would be an imprecise move for Magnus to take that g6 pawn, because then rook g8 check, king takes h5, rook to g3, and white, while still better, now black has an active rook and can cause a lot of irritation for white's position. So again, Magnus plays another sophisticated and mature move, king to h6. He doesn't yet take that pawn. He knows it's not going anywhere. Rook to c8, king to g7, rook to a8, now a5. Either you create a weakness on c5 or you distract the rook from the back rank. In this case, say if I just take the pawn at c5, rook takes a5 was played by Christian Lacqua. Now king takes g6. You see there's no rook check to attack g3 now. The rook goes to a3, obviously attacking the b3 pawn. f5 check, kicks the king back, and now the rook comes back to d3 to defend the pawn. b5 with the idea that after cb5, as was played in the game, c4 is played, and obviously there's a pin on this pawn. If he takes here, he would lose his rook. But first, Magnus plays rook to e3 check, and in this position, black plays king to f8, and that allows white to deliver a winning blow. Can you see it? That's right, b6. And in this position, black resigned. And the reason is he has to play the rook back to a8 to stop the pawn from advancing, but then pawn takes. And then that's it. Obviously, the pawn goes to c5 with the king cut off, and the game would be over. A very sophisticated game from a 12-year-old Magnus. Now, even after going over this great game from Magnus Carlsen, there are still some great chess you're missing out on. To fix that problem, believe it or not, the key game you're going to want to watch is in this video right here. So be sure to check that out for some amazing chess. Bye.